Good afternoon, my name is Pernille Lalau and I'm your Master of Ceremony. Welcome to this year's Metstrade Sustainability Session on Sustainable Marine Powertrains and Alternative Fuels. Following yesterday's session about marine biofouling and its effect on marine biodiversity, today we have the opportunity to look into how recreational boating is technologically responding to another one of the three environmental threats in our planet. That is climate change and the energy transition that is required in order to meet the net zero emissions targets by 2050 and to limit the effects of temperature rises and disastrous changes to our water systems. These environmental risks have significant implications for the global ocean, which covers 71% of the Earth's surface. And quite obviously, leisure boating and the industries that support it are very much part of this equation as stewards of the oceans. So, this afternoon we have assembled a great panel of experts who have all been involved in developing and specifying marine energy and propulsion systems, which are playing their part in the transition away from fossil fuels and the traditional internal combustion engines. If you have any questions on this topic, you can of course share them with us via the chat function at Metstrade Connect. So, to get the discussion going, let me introduce you to my co-host Patrick Hemp, who is technical consultant at ICOMIA. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you very much.
This morning we had our first conversation at the DAME Awards. Huh?
Correct.
And
yes.
Right now you're back. I'm very happy about that. Well, I guess we're all familiar with various ways of looking at the energy transition in our daily lives. Solar energy, I have solar panels, wind energy, the way that we deal with our garbage, the way that we eat, and so on and so on. Electrical cars, and of course also right now the emergence of hydrogen energy. It's more and more talked about. Toyota is really well at it in Japan, driving their cars in that system. Europe has not really adapted to that yet. Can I ask you, how do you see these various technologies evolving into the marine leisure industry?
It's a good question.
It's a lot, I know. It's a lot, but you can handle that.
It's a great question, and I think it's just a pleasure to be talking about these kind of things. And really, as an industry, we do face some unique challenges. I think within the space we're in, we often get these questions around why isn't there a Tesla motorboat of the seas right now? And it's very difficult. It's a challenging environment. You know, boats typically need about 10 times the power requirements than normal combustion engines. So we're more in the aviation space than in the on-road or transportation space because we have this critical weight element. So there's lots of challenges. It doesn't mean that it can't be done. It's just careful consideration of sort of power management and how that's used on board.
Yeah, we've actually learned also today, and you were all well known as experts in the industry, that copy-paste is not really something that you can fully do, of course, huh? As you're actually expressing now. And so the different technologies that you see in all these other industries, could you say that you're at the right pace right now as the marine industry, or are you behind? Or?
I think in a way we do. There's a lot more we can be doing, but events like this and being joined by panelists who really are the world's experts on some of these technologies, we're doing well. I think the critical thing we have to remember is that not all of this energy can come from the sun and wind alone. So at some point we need to be able to refuel, whether that's plugging in to refuel or going to the nearest gas station and getting a biofuel. That's still to be determined, but it's that infrastructure being a global industry and boats moving all over the world on the sea. It's quite a challenge.
Yeah, and of course also interesting how you will implement maybe also a hybrid structure on board that could help with first still some fossil fuels, at least giving that propulsion that you need. On the other hand, I would say that everybody has his own specific design criteria, right? And demands. And I'm sure that also the new generation, who is very much interested in boating, and there's also big demand in boating right now, it also has its special demands. also is asking for a kind of ready-made solutions versus to the older generation that is still boating on the combustion engines, and they might not be wanting to transition into those new systems yet. So, well, you were saying you brought some great panelists today.
Yeah,
so,
I should let them talk.
Yes, exactly. Introduce them to us, please. Yeah.
Yeah, so we joined today. We do have a virtual guest. I'll start off with Dr. Christoph Ballin, who's co-founder of Torqeedo.
Thank you.
Welcome. Yeah, and you're familiar with these types of panelists, and thanks for coming back.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
On the screen, we do have Jacopo Molinari, who's representing Fincantieri Yachts. Welcome, Jacopo.
Thank you, and thank you for hosting this talk.
And lastly, we have Laurent Pérignon, who we're also familiar with. Those who know a little bit about Energy Observer, and Laurent's now with Energy Observer Developments, maybe with a particular focus on hydrogen. So
indeed.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
Great.
So, gentlemen, what we were just introducing, all these different demands and different ways on going about in that energy solutions for your industry. Can you comment on how you see that playing out for in regard to lowering the emissions from existing diesel and petrol engines that are still used now? Would you suggest to give the answer? Or do you...
Yeah, I think just to add, I think we just got to be aware in these discussions that we're not always looking for an end ideal solution, that there will be these pathways to that solution.
Yes.
You've mentioned hybrid, and these concepts are going to come through. So it's not always that we know where we're going, but we know which path sometimes to take. So
yeah, you're actually taking the journey, and by making the journey in an open-minded state, you could say that by the end you will get to a solution.
correct.
And implying already other solutions in the meanwhile, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think Christoph's very familiar with those sort of pathways, having been a startup who dealt with this electrification challenge. How do you see things progressing? I know you're not directly involved in Torqeedo now, but you're very much in that new technology space.
Yeah, and from my perspective, it's exactly as you said. We have to think from the end, also as Pernilla said at the introduction, on how to reach net zero by 2050. And then we have to define paths that lead there. And from my perspective, we are not as advanced as we should be. And that holds true for many industries. You know, going to net zero means we have to change how we create energy, how we deal with mobility, how we deal with agriculture, with industry, how we do cement and steel. And every industry needs to do its part. And if we see that, the IPCC calculated that in order to stay on the path for a climate change of 1.5 degrees Celsius versus pre-industrial temperature, would mean we need to reduce our CO2 emissions by 45% compared to 2010 already in 2030. That is 9 years from now. So do we see that we will cut our combustion engines by 50% in the next 9 years? Of course we won't. No. Other industries are late too, but we in the marine industry are particularly late.
Yeah.
And so I think it's extremely urgent for us to adapt and to discuss how we can get onto that pathway. And I think it's a responsibility for all the industry leaders to create the paths that we feel are feasible for us. And I think that will require a lot more engagement by leading players in industry for drivetrains and for boat building to really engage into that field. Because overall, I believe we're in an electric market share in the ballpark of some 2%. Compared to where we need to go and compared to the automotive industry, we're way behind. And I think we do need to step it up and take it more seriously. And I'm extremely thankful that we have this discussion, because it helps to change and to give impulses to the industry to really do something.
Yeah. Okay. But that means first owning it and take the responsibility. So that at least something will also start in that whole journey.
Yes, we as suppliers have to provide products that are suitable for the application, so that for the users in a use case by use case comparison, which type of propulsion do I choose? We see for more and more segments that people choose technologies that can be climate neutral and that lie on the path towards a net zero 2050.
Okay.
What about you, Laurent? What is your vision?
Well, I mean, I fully agree, obviously, with Christoph, but where I will talk about the hydrogen solution in the sense that it's not a solution, but it is. Remember that hydrogen being storage of energy, it actually complements all the other solutions, and especially when we talk about electrification of the boats and the use of batteries. And this is where it's the best ally of zero emission solutions in that sense. And all the solutions we can put forward is all about extending the range, making it easier and better to turn to electrical solutions, because batteries have a limited range. And so by combining with hydrogen, then you do get straight towards zero emission. Because the objective is really, instead of working on temporary solutions, is to try and achieve the ideal solution as fast as possible.
So here we're already talking about certain solutions, but Jacopo, if I may include you in the conversation, as a yacht builder also, what do you really receive as typical demands from the clients if it's about powering?
Well, in the last few years, I can say that almost any inquiry we received included two words. That was energy recovery and hybrid solutions. So it's actually four words, okay? Energy recovery, which helps improve the efficiency of the boat overall, so in turn, it turns out that you reduce the emissions. And hybrid solutions is a catch-all word which can mean almost anything, but usually is translated into electrification of the boat. So turning from a conventional diesel mechanical propulsion or diesel electric for the larger yachts to some kind of solution where you have batteries, which can be sized both for peak shaving of the diesel engines and generators, so you operate them in a smoother way and reduce the emissions. Or as an alternative, we have been also asked to provide a lot of batteries so as to be able to propel the boat for some hours in a really zero emission operation. And this is very useful if you can repower the boat at short intervals, because powering a boat would require a huge amount of batteries if you had to make long travels. And this, I can say, is the biggest constraint in this solution of fully electric with batteries boats. So as my colleagues were saying, technologies have to complement themselves. You have to put the batteries, but also couple them with some other technology, which can be hydrogen in the near future or other solutions in the immediate future. Because again, we have to do something now, not in 2049, aiming for 2050.
Well, of course, we hear you here, Jacopo, that of course, but it's interesting to hear that the demand is already there.
Just one thing to interject. Jacopo said the hydrogen in the near future. I'm saying hydrogen is today, is now, is available now.
It's
not the
now.
Near future, it's now.
Well, then Jacopo will be happy.
I know it's there, but it's hard to have clients move so dramatically to a new technology, because this is a kind of a slow world. And we as builder, of course, we have a duty in showing our clients that the technology is there, it is ready, and it can be implemented. Still, our world moves quite slowly, so
it has to be user-friendly.
Takes a lot of persuasion.
If I may jump in there, there's kind of for boat or yacht manufacturers, there's three ways to go to net zero and to be carbon neutral. One is using battery electric vehicle. The second is using hydrogen in combination with fuel cells typically. The third one is synthetic fuels that are done in a carbon neutral way. So those are the three options that we have. And of course, we can always combine them. The thing that I think needs to be taken into account is the efficiency from the wind park or the solar cell to produce one of the three differs greatly. So if we can get along with a battery electric solution compared to a hydrogen solution, we need about 2 to 3 times the amount of raw energy to create the hydrogen solution. And if we go to synthetic fuels, we need about 6 times the amount of energy to create the synthetic fuel solution. Yeah. And the logic that is extremely strong that comes from it, because that also translates into cost, means that we will use battery electric solutions wherever they are sufficient to do the duty cycle. And then hydrogen and synthetic fuels will help us to decarbonize those segments of the markets that electricity can't reach. And then on top, especially for hydrogen, there are other advantages. There's a huge political will behind pushing hydrogen at the moment, like in the EU hydrogen strategy. There's also a lot on resilience of infrastructure and storing hydrogen that speaks for hydrogen. But at the end of the day, the fundamentals in overall efficiency will play an important role. And so the question for us is, on the street, this discussion is already decided. There won't be hydrogen cars. Overall, worldwide, we have some 20,000 highly subsidized hydrogen cars running. That won't be the future. They will all go electric, battery electric. But the question is, which are the segments that batteries can't reach? And in the marine industry, we will have more of them than on land.
Of course.
And then we come to an interesting discussion, because already today, anything that moves slowly and in displacement mode and not too far, you can do today electric. The difficulty are things that need to go fast and long. And there we see an interesting competition. We actually see a competition between foiling and hydrogen. Because potentially by adding foils, you can run applications with battery electric solutions that without foils you would have to revert to hydrogen. And so the interesting question for our industry is, where do the borders run? Where we use battery electric, then we move to hydrogen, and then with regards to the large ships like Jacopo represents, they may end up with synthetic fuels. But knowing that there will be a cost increase the further we go into the second and third option.
Well, actually, it's so interesting. I really like the way that you're positioning it and giving us an outlook on what the demands are also. Because if you think about the whole car electrification, first of all, was also all about how far do you want to go, how quick do you have to power up, how much time do you have to travel, and then the proposition came to say, okay, if you want to go on summer holiday, then you would have to rent at your car manufacturer another car, maybe on fuel, so that you can still drive from Amsterdam to Rome. And if you only go in the city, you will have a short electric battery. But that will also play out in your industry, of course. That people will change their demand, and that they will say, okay, maybe now we want to make a longer trip, and also we want to be able to do it all. And if we cannot, then we won't buy it.
That's where the hydrogen combination with batteries comes into play. For all the projects we work on, it's always finding and optimizing the right combination, where extending your range and being able to answer that type of user profile, where the batteries have some limitations, and of course it's improving, but with the combination of the two and the use of the fuel cell, then you're in a position to better answer that demand with less volume, in a way less weight as well on board. So obviously when it comes with efficient hulls as well, I mean, a lot of projects we work on is catamarans, for example, because the hulls are efficient. So that combination is really the ideal scenario. Of course, it's not always suitable for every project, but generally speaking, it works actually pretty well.
And I think, our customers, Jacopo sold it, also the automotive industry shows it. Customers increasingly and to a large degree are willing to buy ecologically friendly solutions. They are.
Yeah.
It's up to us as an industry to make them proper offers.
Exactly.
And that means the combustion engine manufacturers need to step up their efforts to offer climate-friendly solutions.
Yeah.
The boat builders
Yeah.
need to step up doing projects with people who offer carbon-friendly solutions. And we as an industry have the responsibility and the obligation to offer our boaters products that kind of enable us to continue our boating lifestyle, while at the same time really honestly working towards a net zero and a substantial reduction already by 2030.
Yeah.
Right,
But the
yeah.
interesting thing, of course, if you look at the automotive industry, they have also stepped aside from only thinking of their car to be the solution for the transportation. They're looking now into a transportation concept, an offer where you can sometimes use the car, then you use a bike, then you use a tram or a train, and they're just offering you the whole proposition of transportation. A proposition like that, would that be also in your way of thinking for yachting and for the marine leisure industry, that you say, well, we're manufacturing the different solutions, but we will offer them to you also in a diversity where you can easily use them as a customer?
I think yes, and we have these boat clubs and things, but overall we need to say we are way behind automotive. In the automotive world, there is not a single player who doesn't have an electric solution.
By now,
And
yeah.
because we're talking 2021, even 2022.
Yeah.
Now look at us in the marine industry. It's quite a difference.
Yeah, you first have to come up with the solutions.
Exactly.
I totally agree.
And,
yes.
and I think that is, I think it is extremely important that we not see only startups. Torqeedo, we're 15 years old or 16, but still a young company. It's important that we not only see new companies offering solution, but also the big players in the industry who are, I think, finally working on things, but are really, really late.
I think there are interim solutions we can do now as well, and we have to experiment and try and almost demand some of those solutions. One is this, we've been talking about sustainable fuels, so that drop-in fuels now are starting to become available. They are expensive, difficult to get hold of, so not at every marina. But there's definite savings in those drop-in fuels now on your engines. They don't need to be modified, most of them, to accommodate them. I think the difficulty is in trying to understand how sustainable that actual drop-in fuel is, where it's grown, what crops it's been made out of, has it used any bio-waste and the like, and that's difficult for most of us. Yeah.
Well, that's also, of course, depending on the nation where you live, on the country, on the national reserve, on the kinds of energies that they are producing. Because here we're in the Netherlands a bit behind on that. Also, Denmark is much more ahead. So if I'm charging my car in Denmark, I will be much more sustainable than doing that here in the Netherlands.
But for me, that discussion isn't really relevant because the question is not whether I save 5% today. The question is exactly as we said, how do we reach net zero by 2050? And we will not reach net zero by 2050 by driving combustion engine cars until 2049, and then go from a market share of 2% to 100% in 2050. That's not how developments work. And so everybody who drives an electric car, everybody who drives an electric boat, hydrogen, battery electric, completely regardless, everybody who does that does a step towards reaching net zero in 2050, regardless how dirty the energy mix.
And the technology is there; it's available.
Exactly, it's the path.
It's and that step forward is about embracing that shift. Yes, it does have cost implication. Yes, it does have infrastructure and regulations implications in improving everything. But the reality is the technology is already available, and it's progressing fast in every aspect, whether we're talking about synthetic fuels, we're talking about batteries, hydrogen capacity, storage capacity, all that is improving fast. And as Jacopo said, okay, the industry is slow where they need to speed up. Working with classification societies about stepping forward and stepping up their adaptation of the regulations to make the shift faster. That's really key with the government supports and everybody. The owners, the yacht owners are asking for it. We get lots of people, shipyards, naval architects, designers coming to see us because the owners are asking for it. So we need to be, and we know the technology is there. So now let's just do it, you know?
Let's just do it. Well, what's keeping you, I would say? Well, I have a viewer's question, and that brings us to a bit more detailed question. It could be a question that maybe Jacopo gets to deal with in his daily life. That is, how does the future development of battery technology look right now? Where are we at? Are we likely to see higher energy densities, longer range, and improved life cycles? It's a good question. Who do you think? Yeah.
I think I can answer.
Yeah.
With regards to energy density, we are currently at about, at the good solutions, at about 150 watt hours per kilogram. We are at that stage already since 2017 about. And if we look through over the boat show, that's kind of the best in class that we still see in that ballpark. I would expect that in the next year not to go up very quickly, but with the current technology, we can reach probably twice that.
Yeah.
If today with a foiling boat, like the Candela boat, you can go 14 nautical miles planing with what is available with current, with the existing lithium technology, including coming solid state, we can go to double. So you can think of electric planing boats going up to 80 nautical miles. That's kind of where we can go from an energy density perspective. From a cost perspective, it's even more interesting because right now, if you go over the boat show and you buy a battery at a consumer price level, you pay about €1,000 per kilowatt hour. That's what you buy.
Okay.
Now, if you ask a consultant what are the costs in automotive, they are already in the next year below €100 per kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
And over the next years, on cell level, not on battery level. Now, and in the next years, they will go to somewhere between 50 and 100. So the question is, how can we get from the below €100 per kilowatt hour that we are on cost level in automotive and bridge that, or bridge coming from the €1,000 per kilowatt hour that consumers pay today, how can we get nearer to make more attractive offers to people who want to drive climate-friendly boats? And there it takes me back to, that's a question of volume, that's a question of large companies investing heavily into going towards net zero. And again, this is kind of my call to players in the industry. This is what we need to do, it's our responsibility.
Yeah, it's your responsibility, it's something you need to do. There are all these questions and demands, but how is it going to move? You're all saying and stating it should be done right now, so what's keeping you? Patrick, what would you say?
Well, I still think, I mean, you raise an interesting point about class societies and the like, that we do have to play a catch-up on the technical side as well, that supportive mechanism. So we need to give surety to boat owners, boat builders, that when they're building and assembling these boats, that putting big battery banks in is okay. The support comes from standards and the like, you know, just to address some of the risk that may be associated with electrification that end users aren't familiar with. So there is a lot more, not just financial support or investment, but also from within the industry. And we are working towards that. I sit on some of these ISO standards development, and we're trying like mad to play catch up. So it's interesting, yeah.
But well, you're playing the play, I would say, and in doing so, by the end, suddenly things might speed up, and suddenly you're there. I mean, I remember the moment that I was reading in the paper that the price of solar went beneath fossil fuel, and nobody had expected that. That was a moment of transition where the non-fossil fuels suddenly became really interesting, whereas before they were looked upon as some kind of ideological idea, and suddenly it was there. So I'm happy that you're awake, I would say, gentlemen. You also, Jacopo, thank you so much for joining in. Your awakeness of all at the table will definitely take care that I believe that when those solutions are really passing by, that you will jump on time in it, and it will happen. Wouldn't you say so?
Absolutely, and I think Christoph's raised a very good question around collaboration within our industry as well, where we mustn't be afraid to learn and fail by ourselves. We must start sharing this knowledge. So don't be afraid for boat builders to try new things, new propulsion mechanisms, and don't be afraid to fail.
Exactly.
You know, any pathway that we take towards decarbonization is good.
Exactly, because you're serving a higher goal and you
Yeah.
can only do that jointly. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being here. This was the sustainability session on the subject of marine powertrains and alternative fuels. I wish you a great day at your show, at your exhibition. And for those of you who are watching via the Metstrade Connect platform, I wish you a pleasant day full of connectivity, because that's still going on. Remember that the system allows you to make virtual appointments with exhibitors and visitors at Metstrade. It's during, but also after the show. Here in the TV studio, we will be back tomorrow with another sustainability session, this time focused on the Yeti concept, an environmental rating system for super yachts. The session is organized in cooperation with the Water Revolution Foundation. Thank you so much for watching. I hope we will continue really soon again our conversation, for it's ever so interesting. And it did spark the energy out here also in me. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching. Bye.
Thank you.